If there's one thing everyone seems to know about Bitcoin, it's this. There will only ever be 21 million of them. But what if I told you that famous number? Well, it isn't actually correct. Let's dive into the hidden truth behind Bitcoin's supply cap.
You've heard this a million times, right? It's pretty much Bitcoin 101. It's presented as this fundamental, unchangeable law of the network. The total supply is fixed, it's finite, and it will never ever go past 21 million. That's what gives it its digital scarcity.
Well, here's where it gets interesting. That number, it's a fantastic, and I mean very close approximation. But the actual final number of Bitcoins that can ever exist, it's just a little bit different. And the reason why shows you this really cool collision between perfect, beautiful math and the messy reality of computer code. Okay, so first things first, let's talk about where that 21 million figure even comes from. It's not some random number Satoshi Nakamoto pulled out of a hat. Nope, it's the result of some really elegant math that was baked into Bitcoin's design from day one.
It all boils down to this thing called the block reward. See, when Bitcoin first started, miners would earn 50 brand new Bitcoin for every block they added to the chain. But here's the kicker. That reward gets sliced in half every 210,000 blocks. We call this the halving. So it went from 50 down to 25, then to 12.5, now it's at 6.25, and it's just going to keep on halving, getting smaller and smaller forever.
So when you map this out, you get what's called an infinite geometric series. You're basically adding up an infinite number of these shrinking rewards. And, it's one of those weird but awesome things in math where even though you're adding things up forever, the total actually closes in on one single finite number.
And that limit, the sum of all those rewards, getting tinier and tinier into infinity, converges to precisely 21 million. So, on a whiteboard, in the pure world of math, the answer is a perfect 21 million. But Bitcoin doesn't run on a whiteboard. It runs on code.
And this is where we get our reality check. You see, perfect math is happy to divide by 2 forever, creating these infinitely tiny fractions. But computers, they don't do infinity. They need real, specific, countable units. For Bitcoin, that smallest possible unit is called a satoshi. You can think of it like a penny to a dollar, except there are 100 million satoshis in just one Bitcoin. And this is absolutely key. It is the smallest piece. You cannot have half a satoshi or a quarter of a satoshi. It's always a whole number, period. And this right here, this is the conflict. On one hand, you've got the math formula saying, hey, just keep dividing forever. But on the other hand, you've got the code saying, whoa, hold on, I can only count whole satoshis. This single limitation is what actually prevents the total supply from ever hitting that perfect 21 million. So how does this actually work in practice? How do we lose these coins? Well, this rule, that you can't create a fraction of a satoshi, has 2 big consequences that slowly chip away at that final number. Let's break them down. First, you've got this slow, steady drip of lost value from rounding down. You can think of it like a death by 1,000 cuts. And second, there's a sudden, hard stop, a final cutoff point where the creation of new coins just ends cold. Okay, let's make this real. We're going to jump way into the future, to the 10th halving. According to the pure math, the block reward at that point should be a very specific number. The math says the reward should be 4,882,812.5 satoshis. You see that little 0.5 hanging off the end? That tiny fraction? That's our entire problem right there. Because the Bitcoin code literally cannot create half a satoshi, it has a simple rule. It doesn't round up, it doesn't save it for later, it just discards the fraction. It rounds down to the nearest whole number. That half satoshi, it just vanishes into thin air. It's never created. So the actual reward that the miner receives is 4,882,812 satoshis. That half satoshi is gone. Forever. And this little rounding error happens again and again at different halvings, shaving off tiny, tiny fractions from the total possible supply each time. Now for that second, more dramatic part, the final cutoff. After the 30-second halving, the reward will finally get down to exactly 1 single satoshi per block. But then the 33rd halving happens. What's 1 divided by 2? 0.5. And since the protocol can't create 0.5 satoshis, it rounds down to 0. And that's it. From that moment on, the block reward is 0, forever. The party's over, and new coin creation stops completely. So when you add up all those little rounding errors, and you account for that final hard stop, where do we end up? What is the actual real-world maximum number of Bitcoin that will ever exist? And here it is. The theoretical max in a perfect world is 21 million on the dot. But the actual code-enforced maximum is 20,999,999.9769. We end up losing just a tiny fraction of a Bitcoin, which sounds small, but it's actually over 2 million satoshis, all thanks to these little rounding errors over the centuries. And what's really important to get is that this isn't a bug or a mistake that needs to be fixed. It's a fundamental and, honestly, an intended consequence of building a system with a finite, indivisible base unit. It's just how digital systems that rely on whole numbers have to work. So the next time you hear someone say 21 million, you'll know the real story. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? Where else in our digital lives do these beautiful, elegant theories run smack into the hard limits of the real world? It's something to think about. Thanks for tuning into this explainer.